So let's get to this first question. What's preventing mental health peer support in the church? Now, anybody that's involved in mental health and this kind of advocacy work, they all kind of know the answer, and the answer is stigma. Okay, so we all know that it's stigma related. However, we've got to kind of break that down, because if you're talking to church members or pastors, they don't really kind of understand that whole basis. So when we talk about stigma, we got to kind of break it down to kind of where I like to look at a couple of different things. So the first one is confusion. So the stigma brings a lot of confusion, especially in the church or in the faith experience, because when you have someone that's dealing with depression and anxiety, it tends to come out as an emotional dysfunction or emotional problem, which therefore results into kind of a spiritual problem. So therefore, if you're not experiencing something spiritually, it's going to affect you emotionally, then you have some sort of breakdown. So then there's some sort of ministry that happens in order to try to get back the emotions into the right place by doing the spiritual exercises. So unfortunately, it can come across as a motivational, spiritual quick fix type of thing. However, when we're looking at depression, anxiety, it's a little bit beyond just a motivational or just getting everything in check as far as a spiritual exercise. There's more to it. So it's a lot of confusion. And it's not because the pastor or the ministers they don't care. It's just they're confused and they don't know how to respond to it. Now, the second area with this is more of kind of a discomfort. And discomfort is when they come across mental illness, which they don't understand, which is kind of going to be more like schizophrenia, a personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, or a very, very challenging bipolar disorder. So that kind of gets brushed off into the mental health care system. We can't help you. We don't understand that. So you need to really go into the mental health care system to get all your help. Or unfortunately, some get thrown into a deliverance type of ministry and things like that, where they're trying to exorcise demons out of them and things like that. As one person commented on one of our social media channels, that mental illness is not really the fault of the person, it's really kind of the fault of the minister, because they don't know deliverance ministry well. Which, hey, for that person, that's honestly where they're at. And so through a dialogue we can get into. It's not to try to fight them on these issues and things like that. There's just a misunderstanding. However, so when we're looking at having support groups, we want to be able to address the confusion and the discomfort, even with individuals that are dealing with schizophrenia, because we've seen people with schizophrenia and those types of disorders in these living grace groups, and they have incredible, powerful testimonies, and they're being a witness for what God's doing in their lives, and they're actually bringing other people to the group. So we've seen, even on that level, incredible stories and situations that happen for them. So, all right, well, now let's look at how do you start a group at your church. So let's kind of get into that question. So how do you start a peer group at the church, when you, especially with it in this mental health? Okay, so the first thing that we kind of look at in this is really kind of the heart check. Are you ready? Are you in a ready place to give and serve rather than just to be an advocate and push an agenda? What pastors and ministers kind of shy away from is the person who's got that real agenda. They want to push this mental health thing, and the church has to really embrace it and really take this on. And there's a place for that at some point, but probably not in trying to start a group and things like that. We want to advocate and the agenda for mental health at the right places and the appropriate places, whether that's political or community activities and things like that. However, at the church, we want to come in with the heart of a servant. We're ready to give and to serve, because that way, if the minister or the pastor, if they say, no, we're not ready for this, or we don't want to do this, if someone's going in with an agenda and they're just advocating, they're going to get offended and they're just going to get into an argument. But the person that's more servant-hearted, they're going to be patient and continue the dialogue with the church. So we just say, hey, we want to have a good heart so that we're working with the church, not pushing the church, okay? So the first thing is basically you want to meet with the pastor or the pastoral team and kind of really talk through a couple of things, okay? So the first thing is the story, and the second one is the plan. All right, so the story is that they got to connect with your story. So you don't want to go into an hour and a half long spiel of your story. However, just a good connection, because that's where they're going to be brought into a lot of empathy of seeing your journey, or the journey of your family, and then being able to connect with that, and then seeing how God was involved in your journey and where it's brought you to a great place of recovery and strength and even healing in that process. So from connecting over the story, then the second one is really having a good plan. Okay, so pastors want to see a plan. That's why they like grief share or grief care or divorce care or even Celebrate Recovery, because these are credible programs. So, and at that point, if you're wanting to start a group, you want to look at what are some available resources that you can do, and ours is one of those resources. So our Living Grace group is a credible program that you can use. It's a curriculum, and it goes through the whole process of education, tools, and even understanding and integrating a place of faith within that process. So that's where you can show them something like this, so that you can even give them a copy, or you can go to our website and download a sample for them to look at, so they can see this process. And the other thing with an advantage with a program like ours is that actually have published research on the Living Grace group, which is the peer group, when the research shows that it reduces symptoms, it aids in overall mental health recovery, and it renews faith. So something like that, they can look at the resource of what it has and what it offers, and then you can give it to them and things like that. So you want to and give them time to look over it, because it probably is a paradigm shift for them. Okay, and the other thing too is you want to be able to address that this is a support group, not a therapy group. Okay, because this is what the pastor's afraid of. They're afraid if you open up this group to our church, we're going to have all these people with all these challenging needs, and they're going to cause all these problems, and we can't handle that from a therapeutic standpoint. However, the group can be very therapeutic. It's not a professional group, so you don't have to be a professional to lead the group. So from that standpoint, you're just telling them, hey, we're offering a support. This support group is going to be for people who can participate and stay along with the group. If someone comes to the group and they can't participate and they're having a challenging time, then they obviously probably need to be in a therapy group, which there are probably some resources within your area and city, which you can work with your local mental health organizations to find those resources. So, and again, just that they understand that this is a simple process to provide that support for somebody who's in the journey. And even though that they're afraid, they might be afraid of somebody with so-called schizophrenia, that doesn't mean that they can't be in a group. They can be in a group because they can actually do well. And I've led groups with those individuals, and they do fantastic. And again, like we said earlier, or I said earlier, that they actually can be a testimony to others. So, and the last thing with this is that you want to be able to start out small. It's okay that if you have 3 or 4 or 5 people, that's actually pretty good, so that's not too overwhelming for that. But and you can grow over time. You don't have to try to make this a community-wide event or anything like that. Just a place where you're offering some support for people in the church, and you can tell others in the community about it if you've got that type of support and other people that want to be involved. Okay, so that's kind of as far as starting. Just a real simple kind of way of getting to this process as far as how do you start one at the church and how to go through that process. Okay, another question is, how do you handle when people are too busy to attend? And sometimes it's until the crisis happens, that's what gets them to be in the group. Well, this is handled basically just making the time for the group work best for everybody. I know that when Dr. Stanford and I, when we started these groups and leading these groups, we actually had them every other week because we knew that people were busy. There was a lot of other commitments that they were trying to fulfill. However, we were trying to have that. But over time, we saw people that were requesting it. They wanted it to have weekly, and then we did move to weekly groups. I know other groups across the nation that they actually meet every other week because they live in big cities, and then or just the time commitments for everybody else. But however, you can have those just whatever works for everybody's schedule and their timing, and you just focus on those people that can make it weekly if that's what the group decides, and then just let others come and go as they have time to be participating in the group depending on their activities and things like that. Hey, and if they're not having crisis that doesn't require them to be there, well, praise God, because that's what we want. We want them to be out of crisis, not in crisis, so that we can have this group. However, they're still going to benefit from being a part of a group. Okay, so another question is this. When you have physical symptoms of feeling very lethargic and it's very laborious to even try to get out to attend a group, how do you deal with that and getting people to come? So the kind of the first thing with that is understanding, and we covered this in our training, is that you're not responsible, you're supportive. So you want to be encouraging and not kind of feeling guilty yourself that you've got to make sure that they make it, or that you make them feel guilty for not being able to come. So the way you address that is kind of first validating the reality of the pain. That this is you want to be able to tell them, hey, look, depression is very hard, and depression hurts, and sometimes it just hurts to move. And we totally understand, we totally get it. Okay, so I think when you're communicating with those individuals, being able to express that with them very well. Okay, and then being able to affirm their value. You want to express that, hey, we love having you be here with us in the group. We want you to know that you're a part of this community. We totally understand, and we're praying for you. And you can even encourage them to say, hey, even if you could just make it and just be here, you don't have to say anything, you don't have to do anything. We just love having you in the room. And it's just that ministry of presence that we just love to be with you. We don't try to get something out of you and things like that, but that there's a value of just coming and just being. That's enough. And they get enough just by being with everyone and listening with the other individuals. However, if they, if they're having a hard time just trying to even do that, that's where you can get creative. I know with some of the groups that I've led, I've seen that other members, we just empower them with each other. And what I've seen is that they actually go and pick up each other. Some don't have cars, some can't make it. And then there's a couple other individuals that they just go around and they go pick them up and they bring them to the group. So that's kind of a creative way that the group can be involved. So it's not all responsible on you to try to make sure everybody's making it, things like that. Then the other one is, you can be creative. You can do, hey, you know what? We're going to have you on FaceTime. We're going to FaceTime you in. And so don't worry about coming. You've got a smartphone or whatever. We're going to get you in. Or if you have some other online mechanism that they can do that. We actually had one group where an individual, they actually moved out, didn't have a group, and they wanted to be a part of it. They still wanted to be part of our group. So we just kind of set up a computer, and we had an online little thing. And so we had chair, computer, chair. And it was great. And they were there. And we did that for a short time just to help that individual as they were transitioning. And again, for those individuals that can't come because of their symptoms, as a facilitator, it's just real simple to just make a follow-up call or even just a text, and just to say, hey, we're thinking of you, missed you, and hope things are going well. Remember, it's not to feel responsible, but how you can be creatively supportive for those individuals. Okay, so and again, if you have questions, you can just kind of tap that Q&A button. Hopefully, you guys are. I'm not seeing any questions coming in, but let me see here. Sorry, I didn't have it popped up. Sorry. So we'll get to some of these questions here. Okay. Okay, do you recommend setting aside time in a peer support group to allow people to share their stories and concerns, or is that getting into a group therapy category? Okay, I think that, the reason why we have the curriculum is because people share their story along the way. And some people don't want to share their story, and so that's why we allow them just to come and participate, and then they want to share as they feel more comfortable. So again, that's why a lot of times with the curriculum, why it's really helpful is because people with very strong anxiety and things like that, they sometimes they hide behind the material to feel safe, but they're still in the group. And then some of the questions in there will help them open up, and then they'll start sharing about their life. So no one's forced to share that. I think that that's a creative option that you can look at with your group, and to look at if that's a separate time you want to talk about the different stories or concerns like that. But I think you do want to have caution on doing something like that, because you're going to get into a lot of Q&A time, and you may not have the experience, and that can get into a lot of unstructured conversation. So we always just say, if you're going to do the group, stay with the curriculum. It's going to provide you a lot of education and tools that will be very constructive for that. So, so then another person, will I have support for when I start my group? Absolutely. That's why we're here. So if you have questions all along the way, you're starting your group, you can email us, and we can, if you have a specific question or something, we can set up a time with one of our executive directors or our team, and we can walk through some of the concerns or questions that you have with your group. We'll help you with that. You are not alone in leading your group. And again, we're going to be having these webinars all along the way to provide more support and feedback. And we are working on some future ideas. You just stay tuned with us on how to get more involvement and more connection with everybody within the movement. Okay. More question here. Are there best practices in terms of how to communicate and promote the peer support within the church? You know, to get the promotion in the church, we always say is that if you have a good relationship with any of the pastoral team or even with the senior pastor, that would be the best place. Wherever the senior pastor recognizes it and just makes a small announcement, even if it's just for 15 seconds, and he's able to, or she's able to affirm that, then that actually goes well. It welcomes, it brings much more authority to the group. So that would be the first one. Any way that you can work with the pastoral team to make an announcement from the front, and even if it's just a short 10, 15 seconds of, hey, we just want to let everybody know we're starting some mental health support in our church. We value this in our church, and then there's some information in your bulletin. So, and that's where you want to be able to advertise that on through the bulletin, or the website, or different avenues that might have in the church. But I think it's having somewhere where people can contact. So if you're starting that, they'll need your email address so that you can kind of gather everybody together. And one thing you can also do is host a kind of interest meeting on a Sunday afternoon, you know, maybe at 3 o'clock, and have some small refreshments. And it's maybe just an hour long where you talk about, hey, we're going to be starting this mental health support. We're looking for people who are interested in attending, and you just kind of talk about it, and then you can kind of introduce the curriculum or other program that you're going to be using for that. Okay. All right, so would it be possible to have an online support group such as with the Zoom platform for those that may not be able to attend and in support group? You know, we don't have that functionality quite yet. That's something that would be really, really helpful. But I think that's where we have, there are some people that have tried some of those things on a personal basis with their own group, where they've kind of maybe have done like what we did the online or the FaceTime, but they were connected to the group somehow. That might be something we look at in the future as far as some online platform for support like that. So we don't have an answer for that one quite yet. So, but thank you for asking. Do you have people fill out the questions together during the meeting? Well, during the meeting, what you do is, the way that the group is structured is that you kind of go through these kind of facts. It starts out with a faith section. You look at the scripture, you kind of discuss that, and then you kind of talk as a group. You discuss that. They can write down their answers in their book if they'd like to. That's why we encourage everybody to have their own workbook so they can take it home and they can make their own notes. But it's not necessary that they have to fill it out as they go. But we do encourage that they can use it as their own personal workbook and fill it out as they go. But we like to have that discussion within the group and that discovery to happen there. So, okay, is there a way for our pastor to see this webinar at a future date? Yes, you can. We actually are going to have this recorded, and it's going to be posted on our Facebook, and it will be one of our blog posts later on, so that you can easily share this video with them from our blog or from Facebook. So it'll be available for this. And we're going to have other webinars, and we have other information on our website that they can also look through as well. Okay. All right. Another question here. Okay, what are your thoughts on combining family and peer support groups? Would you recommend starting off as a whole group for a quick fellowship, then breaking out for a peer and family groups once we are ready to get it into the curriculum? You know, I think that we would leave that up to you. I think that you could do that. I think that one of the other great support groups that are out there is what's called Fresh Hope. And that's a different curriculum. And what they do is they focus on the family and the peers being together. It's a different format and it's a different way of doing that group. But it's another resource that you can look at where they do things together. The reason why we Dr. Sanford and I developed this to be in separate groups is because we want that dialogue to be constructive without feeling intimidated by, well, my family member's here and I want to be able to talk about this, but I don't want to hurt their feelings, but I'm just trying to be honest with this discussion and things like that. And not that they're having separate conversations, that it's too difficult and it's going to cause problems, because the whole curriculum is designed to improve the relationship between the peer and the family member or the spouse or the parent or sibling or whoever is in close relation to them. So it's constructively that way. So you could, if you wanted to, start out together and then, for a good fellowship time, and then break up. That could be a real beautiful meeting. And then tell us about it. Tell us how you're doing some creative things for that. That would be quite interesting. However, when you get into the curriculum, that's where we have separate curriculum. And because they're working on separate tools as well and discussions that are more personalized for the family member and for the peer. Okay. Should there be age limits, parental attendance with a teen? Okay, so with this question here is that we basically, for the peer group, we're looking kind of at maybe 18 and above, at that level. And typically what we find with these groups is that there's not a lot of young people, especially are doing them, because a lot of young people, they want to be in kind of more of a personalized age for them. They want to be in that. We are working on some material for a younger audience for that high school and college age. So that'll be something that we launch out. We actually have something right now for that. However, we're wanting to kind of do some more pilot testing with that, so that is something that we recognize that is a special audience, and they use a different language and a different understanding at that age. So we are kind of fine tuning that material for a later launch in the future. However, if they want to be a part of a group like this, that would be wonderful, and then you can kind of put them together around a material like this for now. Okay, so once you finish the 16 weeks of curriculum, what then? Okay, so so here's what we say with this curriculum, and for those of you that may not know, it is a 16-week curriculum. So, and what we encourage is that you would do it 8 weeks at a time. Take a break, and then another 8 weeks. So that way you could do it over the fall semester, and then you can do it over the spring semester as well, and then finish that way. So when you finish the group, here's what we encourage folks, is that we encourage them to just go through it again. Because sometimes when people are coming to the group, what we find is that they are coming in distress, and so they're finding a lot of community and care and support, and they're just kind of getting through. And so trying to get the information and all those different things might be a little difficult. But as they get through the group, they start to get better and better and better. So as they go through the group again, they can go through that material again with fresh eyes, new insight, and then they sometimes see it from a different angle the second time through, and it just expands on their knowledge. I know with one particular Living Grace group member, they've been through the group a couple of times, but it wasn't the third time through on the identity topic. It just clicked for this individual. It just expanded, and something just for that individual just spurred on incredible mental health recovery for that individual and their faith. And to this day, they're still doing incredibly. But I remember them testifying that it was in that topic, and it was later on that really connected with them. So we know that the going through a second time or even a third time can be very, very helpful. And the reason why we ask that the groups be repeated is because sometimes people find out about this group halfway through and then they want to attend. And so then they've missed maybe 6 topics already, but now they'll be able to do the last few topics within the curriculum. So by going through again, they'll be able to get the first few topics or the 6 topics that they missed within that whole process. So that's why we asked that they can do it again. Now, a group that's been together and they've been through and they don't want to go through the curriculum, then the group can think about, hey, do we want to do a Bible study together? Do we want to do another group model together? Do we want to do something else that we can do together as a group, and so that they can maintain that community and still continue to grow within that? And again, that's why we just the repetitive with the group is because it's not a closed group. It's always open, and there always might be somebody new that comes in within that group. Okay, all right. So having Thrive Online was wonderful, especially with the QA time. Will you do this again and perhaps at night? Okay, this person is referring to our Thrive Online program. We had that weekly. It's the Thrive is our Thrive workbook, and it goes much more in detailed process than the Living Grace group. It takes the same topics but goes into and expands on many more topics. And it was used for mental health recovery. And we had a weekly 1 hour Thrive Online with our Thrive coach who was going through the material, and anybody could tune in. For right now, we do not have that functioning at the moment. We are looking at different ways that we can provide that support later on. But right now, we don't have a future option for that. But stay tuned. We might have some creative ideas of how we might be able to provide more encouragement with that material. So, thank you for that. Okay, and okay, so we got just a couple of things here. One is how many should be in a group? Okay, as far as in the group, the group size, a good place to be is between 5 and 8 people. And the reason for that is because, again, with some people with anxiety, large groups are just really kind of overwhelming. And so within a smaller group like that, they can feel comfortable and feel easy to share, things like that. However, when you have a 5 to 8, that number of group, that could be really very easy to facilitate, and it's easy for people to share and discuss and work on the different tools together more easily. If you get a little larger, it gets a little bit more time to manage that and things like that. So we want individuals to feel comfortable within the group, and for you to feel comfortable in leading a good sized group as well. Okay, so another question here is: have you seen examples where different churches in a given area combine forces and do a single support group? And the answer to that is yes. We have seen certain groups that the people who are going to those groups actually attend other churches, but it's one specific church that is actually hosting the group. So that is a possibility for that, and we've seen that in many of these different areas across the U.S. And even overseas where the groups are happening. So that is very, very possible. Okay. And the last question is, can you have people with different diagnoses in the same group? Okay, and the answer to that is yes, because when we did the research on this Living Grace group, it was with mixed diagnosis. So there were people that had schizophrenia, there were people that had depression, anxiety, bipolar, or even OCD and things like that. And so what we found is that it's not focused on the diagnosis, it's focused on mental health recovery and the principles that work, that whether you have OCD or whether you have bipolar disorder, it's the principles that are in the material that help increase and improve the renewal of faith and that mental health recovery process. So that's why it's very helpful. Now, there are churches that specialize the groups. So there are some churches that focus in on a group that's just for women with depression or women with a mood disorder, or a men's group that's specifically for depression or anxiety or different things. So we do see those variety of groups as well. So, and again, this is kind of, hey, this is the railroad for you. What the train looks like is for you to create, and the different things that you guys come up with, just tell us about it, because it's we love to hear the creative things that are happening with the different groups. So We are at the end of our time, so we want to honor those of you who have attended, and we thank you for being with us for this webinar. And just in closing, just want to make sure that you know that our training for these groups is absolutely free. So we removed that cost barrier for churches and families and individuals that are looking to get that training for this. So, so if you go to our website at mentalhealthgracealliance.org and then just click on start a group, the Grace Academy, and it gives you all the explanation there and the free resources that you can download from the leaders materials that'll help you for your own personal training and to go along with the video series that walks you through the training.